I'm Deborah Quilter, and welcome to RSI Help YouTube. One of the thorniest aspects of having RSI is that sometimes the very positions that our work puts us in can be stressful to the upper extremity. One of these is keeping the elbows bent and the palms down or pronated, and it can be very injurious, and that's the exact position that we make when we're using the keyboard. So here to answer this question of how this position of keying can be hard on our upper extremities is Dr. Robert Markison, a San Francisco-based hand surgeon of experience diagnosing and treating RSI, both surgically and non-surgically. So Dr. Markison, can you explain why this position of elbows bent and palms down is so hard on the upper extremity for us?
Sure, it has to do with several factors, one of which is we're fundamentally supposed to be moving through a somewhat vertical plane with the upper limb. And as soon as you do this, you start to tighten up the origins of flexor muscle at the elbow. And so the origins are two origins of this flexor carpi ulnaris that gives you ulnar deviation for use of perimeter keys, caps, caps lock, shift, tab, option, control, return, escape, and so on. Every time you do that, you deviate the wrist, you tighten up these vulnerable origins, and they're astride the ulnar nerve running behind the, quote, funny bone, medial epicondyle, out to here, and that's going to serve feeling, little finger, half of the ring, but also 15 out of 20 small muscles. So it's the nerve of feeling, but more importantly, the nerve of dexterity and endurance for fine manipulative use. So as soon as you do this, you tighten up the fibrous origins, and you also tighten up the insertion, and this can have little bands that go over top of the ulnar nerve, and so you can get entrapment not only at elbow, cubital tunnel, but also at wrist, ulnar tunnel. So as soon as you do this, you're tensing up a long musculotendinous system over top of nerve at origins, over top of nerve, ulnar nerve, at insertion. And you do this, you tighten it up, you're moving full span, especially with small hands on a keyboard, and that's just not a good position. You're always better to have a more vertical plane through the hand, wrist, and forearm. That's important.
And what about the ulnar nerve coming? It comes from the neck, correct me if I'm wrong, comes from the neck and goes down the upper arm over that funny bone. So what about having that nerve stretched and in the elbows bent position?
It's partly that. There are elements of stretch when you're in a bent position, and there are studies showing that the pressure in the cubital tunnel increases with flexion. So, but if you start really in brain and then at lower part of brain cross over, then you go through roots and trunks and cords and ramify into peripheral nerves around the armpit. The problems there are myriad because there are 38 primary varieties of the brachial plexus, wherein you're going from spinal cord out to peripheral nerves through these roots and trunks, and there's infinity between those. So a little forward reaching goes a long way, and if you're head forward, you tighten up these roots and trunks. If you're limb forward, you're tightening up pec minor origin, and then you add insult to injury by flexing the elbow, increasing the intracubital tunnel pressure, and then you're moving the dynamic anatomy, tightening up origin and insertion. So you've got a series of problems, not the least of which is stretch at a flexed elbow. But beyond that, disturbance of a whole system with head forward, limb forward, elbow bent, wrist deviated postures.
So even if you keep a neutral wrist when you're keying, as I do, I don't ulnar deviate with my hands when I'm using the cap lock or anything. I move my whole arm. But even that, I'm still potentially getting into trouble just by keeping my palms down instead of in that more neutral posture. Am I correct?
You are correct, but here again, it's varying degrees of elbow flexion extension. And so a sit/stand workstation is going to do better, much better for you because of your ability to change postures and move around.
And in one of our previous conversations, I think you talked about something called the Blix curve.
Right, the Blix curve, and that's really part, and I don't know if this will show properly. Are you seeing this forward or reverse?
I'm seeing it properly.
Okay, So the master of all masters, Paul Brand, and subsequently Ann Hollister joining him, talking about the Blix curve, which is really a curve you never want to violate, which is a muscle curve wherein if you shorten a muscle, see, you have an ideal range of muscle fiber lengths at which they function best. As soon as you shorten a muscle, you start to fail under load or repetition. When you stretch a muscle as you would in these palm down positions, you start to fail. This upswing is really about stretching, really pulling on the muscle tendon unit itself. But the whole point is you want to be here. And when are you here at an ideal range of fiber lengths for form and function and endurance and avoiding failure under repetition? That's really with a more vertical plane through the forearm, wrist, and hand. So never transgress the Blix curve. For the heart, you have a Starling curve that decides whether you're going to go into congestive heart failure by stretching muscle fibers. In the upper limbs, lower limbs, other peripheral muscles, not as dramatic. Nonetheless, always respect the curve. Never stretch unnecessarily. And that goes for palm up as well. So the free swing of the upper limb, if we can, I'll try and back up for this. The free natural swing of the upper limb is like this. And it's kind of an extrapolation of the swing of the walk.
Exactly. I was just thinking that. Yes.
That's right. So it's
Yeah.
really an extrapolation of the swing of the walk. And if you had a point of light on my fingertip, you'd be describing the Fibonacci sequence, the spiral
Oh, how
of a
beautiful.
seashell cross section. And indeed, every time you open and close the hand, you're moving along the cross section of a seashell. So whenever you respect the fact we probably came from the sea in some ways, you're
How
the
beautiful.
natural
I didn't
swing
know
of the
that.
walk,
Yeah.
and you swing into a natural position of function. And that's it. That's so ergonomics thematically bring the object to you. Don't twist, reach, stretch to meet it. There you're a crocodile. Here you're a human.
That's interesting. So it's actually the tool that's sort of dangerous. I mean, you kind of wonder what people were thinking when they designed tools that don't take the human anatomy into consideration.
Well, they weren't thinking about anything except obviously getting products out to end users. But you look at the mouse, 1964 Xerox PARC, and something that is going to point you like that, that's fundamentally unhealthy. You look at
Yeah.
computer keyboards that have looked the same for 30 to 40 years. Those are geared here. There are some split and tilt adjustable ones that are more sensible, and now a more vertical mouse, which is more sensible. But anything that lands you here for keyboard and or mouse use is going to cause trouble somewhere between brain and opposite hand fingertips.
You talked about the brain before, and I'm curious how the brain, is it because of the connection of the musculoskeletal system, the dura, the way the brain is connected with the neck? How is it affecting the upper extremity?
Well, anybody who's studied hand surgery and is a specialist, myself included, and many others worldwide, understand that the hand begins in the opposite hemisphere, sensory motor cortex of brain, such that this is Alaska, California, Texas. The heart might be a tenth of Rhode Island, common to primitive species. And so there's so much traffic back and forth with brain. As soon as you abrade things by twisting muscle tendon units, tightening fibromuscular pathways, and disturbing outflow motor activity, inflow sensory, you've got a problem somewhere between brain and fingertips, and brain has to not only drive the hand, but integrate feedback from the hand. And so if you disturb that by improper postures of especially repetitive use or forceful use, you get into some trouble. It's always a psychophysical matter when you have a strain injury, and your job is to iron it out by proper ergonomics, cycles of action, repose, avoiding transgression of the Blix curve, and making proper use. I mean, it's form, function, fit, and failure avoidance.
Well, this has been the most interesting topic to me, because I remember that you once showed me that wonderful cadaver study that you had been using to teach medical students about the pathway of the ulnar nerve. And I will never forget that, the way you showed me what happens when you bend the elbow and turn the palm down. I could see the nerve being stretched around that corner. It was very clear. So thank you so much for explaining all of this for us, Dr. Markison. And thanks everybody for watching RSI Help YouTube. Please subscribe.